Hello everybody, this is Gregory with 5-Minute Catholic Apologetics and Living, where 5 minutes of your time may get you to the divine. Today I'm going to posit the question, why is it that Protestants hate Catholics more than they do the Orthodox when essentially it's the same faith? Now before we begin, let's start with a prayer. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritui Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum, benedicta tu mulieribus et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostri. Amen. So a couple of related episodes here. We have an episode, do Catholics hate Protestants as much as Protestants hate Catholics? And of course we have an episode here, why traditional Catholics should not migrate to the Orthodox Church, because you do see some traditional Catholics who are like, the Catholic Church is going to apostasy. I don't like what's been going on the X amount of years, so I'm going to go to Orthodoxy. Like Orthodoxy is this halcyon rainbow kingdom, and they have no issues going on over there. But I want to posit this question because, look, yes, Orthodoxy is splintered. There is no unification there. They're always fighting amongst themselves. And yes, there's a difference of theology, let's say, between the Coptic Orthodox, the Bulgarian Orthodox, because they're all autocephalic. They all have their own little heads, the Russian Orthodox and so forth. There is some variety of theology amongst them, but as a whole, if you step back micro or macrocosmically, there's a lot of similarities between Catholicism and Orthodoxy. And something that I think a lot of Catholics forget is that when we talk about Catholicism or Roman Catholicism, we always think of like the Latin Rite, the Catholicism that's most predominant in America. But remember, the Catholic Church has 22 rites. And many of those rites are Eastern. So if you don't like, and we have a playlist here, liturgical abuses that drive me crazy. If you don't like the very kind of, I don't look like a Catholic church, but I am a Catholic church, parish that you might have and other things like that, you can always go to a Maronite Catholic parish or a Byzantine or Ruthenian or a Coptic or, whatever you have. And if you live in a large town, you by all means can go to those masses, go to those liturgies. There's nothing wrong with you. I mean, that's another reason why traditional Catholics or Catholics in general don't need to go to Orthodoxy, because you can still be in a union with Rome. And if you're looking for a better liturgy, but still in the confines of the Bishop of Rome, just go to an Eastern Catholic rite. But overall, and of course there's differences, we have the big fight over the primacy of Rome between Orthodoxy and Catholicism and the Filioque. But the Filioque really is just an excuse. And we talked about this with the episode on Orthodoxy. Most of the rift between Orthodoxy and Catholicism it was always, and we look at 1054 as kind of being the date, but I mean, there was a lot of tension before that. And certainly there were attempts of reconciliation even after 1054, and then with the sacking of Constantinople in the Fourth Crusade, that kind of ended that. But we see this kind of date, but that date is really amorphous because that was the date of the mutual excommunication. But most of it was political, and a lot of it was cultural. The East is Greek, the West is Latin, and just even things like the way that they would do their beards were different. I mean, just all these cultural and political things, and Filioque lights them was just kind of an excuse, to be honest. But either way, so if you look at it macrocosmically, there's a lot of similarities between Orthodoxy and Catholicism. In fact, John Paul II said that it's two lungs of the same body, where we're two separate lungs. And if you look at apostolic succession, we both have it. If you look at the sacrament, we both have it. If you look at the liturgies, the Mass, essentially the same. And of course, there's changes a little in liturgies, but there's so much similarities, the communion of saints and all these things like that. But the Protestants don't really think about Orthodoxy, and they don't really hate Orthodoxy as much as they have this vitriol toward Catholicism. And of course, I can't speak for every Protestant in the United States, but Protestants have this kind of view of like all the other denominations, like they don't even focus on the theological differences between, let's say, Baptists and Lutherans. There's a gigantic one. Or between the Reformed, like the Calvin progenitors, like Presbyterianism, and let's say Baptist or Methodist. They are. They're like, yeah, we're all like Protestants. We all kind of get along. This is why we have a video here, like why Protestants church jump so much. Like, if you look at a typical evangelical in their lifetime, they might go to 10 different churches in their lifetime. And they don't even like question like how theologically they can be different, but they don't, it's not really that important because it's about me and the Bible. But they are kind of like unified, and there's like one thing that unifies all Protestants together, and it's their dislike for the Catholic Church. And we talked about in the episode, like, do Catholics dislike Protestants as much as Protestants dislike Catholics? And no, because a lot of Catholics don't even care enough about their faith to even know that there's other Protestants, that there's Protestant denominations and the differences between them. They're like, yeah, whatever, we don't care. And mostly it's just like Protestants unify over one banner, and that's popery. That's the papacy. And I like to akin this to, it's like the popular group in high school. Everybody hates them, but deep down, everybody wants to be them. And if you talk to any Protestant church, and if you say, hey, you want to have 1.2 billion people in your church, they'll be like, sign me up. Of course they want their church to be that big. They'll say, oh, no, we don't. But come on, every church wants to be as big as possible. And I think there's a lot of envy that comes from the Catholic Church. And of course, just a lot of the anti-Catholic bigotry and bias that they were raised with, either just through osmosis, they get it from like comments that their family makes or things that they hear from their pastor, or they really have this shoved down their throat where they really believe that we worship Mary as a goddess, or that we worship a statue like it's an idol. And all this is stuff where you can just look in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the guidebook of what we believe essentially, and see that we don't do anything. We don't believe works get you into heaven. We denounced that heresy 1,700 years ago. But all these like misconception or outright lies or obfuscations, we don't believe in. But either way, there's this just palpable as a whole dislike for Catholicism. But they don't dislike the Orthodox when essentially the theology is the same. Yes, I mean, like well-read Catholics will know that there are distinct differences between Catholicism and Orthodoxy, aside from the supremacy of Rome, like their belief in purgatory, the married clergy, and not all of them believe in the four Marian dogmas. But as a whole, there's a lot of similarities. But there's no like we don't like the Orthodox equally as much as we dislike the Catholics. Now, why is this? I think some of it is just there's not a presence of orthodoxy as much in America, clearly, than there is in the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, there's given in a typical city, there's going to be several parishes, if not scores of parishes. If you're like in a big city like New York or Dallas or LA, there's a Catholic parish in pretty much every 5-mile radius, whereas the Orthodox there aren't going to be as many. And I think that has to do with it. And I think some of it has to do with just like presence in the culture. You think of like there's so many more priests in movies than there are Orthodox priests. Yes, where do you see Orthodox priests? My Big Fat Greek Wedding. That's pretty much it. That's the only movie I could think of. But either in a good way or a bad way, you're going to see movies that have Catholic clerics. Think of the Da Vinci Code, for example. Normally, the Catholics are portrayed, or the Catholic clerics are portrayed like an ominous way or an evil way and all these things. Or think of like a movie like Spotlight or something like that. And you don't really think of like the positive movies like Silence, Scorsese's Silence, for example, which we have a 2-part episode here. But the Catholic Church is just much more kind of in the presence, in the mind of a lot of Protestants, because the second largest Christian group behind Catholicism are lapsed Catholics, so that could be a reason too. By the way, I just posit that question to any Protestants who are listening. Why don't you dislike the Orthodox? Because the Orthodox believe in everything else that we believe in. They don't believe in solo fide. They don't believe in sola scriptura. Just like we don't. You could read Orthodox writings that will call Luther as an arch heretic. I mean, they have no love for the arch heretics of the 16th century. But most Protestants are like, yeah, whatever. But the Catholics, the Catholics. I would love to hear from you guys. Post in the comments, subscribe and share. Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.